listeners, and welcome to episode 88 of Push2Plat. Look, it feels like a good day for it, and we're in for a treat today. We have the #1 gamer score holder from New Zealand, the #1 Xbox gamer, if you like. He's a Hall of Famer. He has a massive True Achievement score. He's also a host on the Real Gamerscore podcast. Now, I know we're getting a bit of Xbox love up in here at the moment, but there is still plenty of PlayStation goodness in the episode today. We're going to talk many crossover games, and the topic we'll be focusing on is the massive multiplayer game. That's right, the MMO that is not Final Fantasy XIV. It is, of course, Neverwinter. Now, this game also available on the PlayStation. It has 2 stacks, I believe, a Hong Kong stack and a rest of the world stack, and plenty of ultra rare trophies if that sort of thing interests you. So we're going to get the lowdown on that game as well today. But it is my pleasure today to introduce and welcome to Push2Plat, Neomaster. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
No, not at all. So look, we've got to throw it out there to start off with. Have you ever played PlayStation? Do you play a little bit of PlayStation at all?
Well, actually, the original PlayStation was the first console I ever owned. So I got into gaming quite late in life. Late as a child, I should say, where, a lot of kids had, NESs or SNESs. My first console was the PlayStation, and I got it basically right before the PlayStation 2 came out, I think. My dad got it cheap. And a couple of my mates had one, and I really got into it. And then so I went straight from that to the PlayStation 2 back in the early 2000s. And then I played all the exclusives. I played everything. I was a big gamer back then. And then after that, I kind of got into the achievement thing. Kind of brought me over to the 360 Xbox side of stuff, because at the time trophies weren't a thing.
Yeah. I see this. You sort of moving across around 2011. So you haven't been tempted to dip your fingers back in. You're firmly converted now to the Xbox side.
I mean, that's not to say that there aren't things on there that I'd want to play on the PlayStation console. Like hands down, the PlayStation and Sony have the much better exclusives. A lot of stuff on there that I'm really interested in. But with the amount of investment that I put into the Xbox system, it's kind of hard to break that these days. So, and most of the stuff that I am interested in is cross-platform, thankfully, especially now with stuff coming to Steam and with the Windows Store expanding out a bit more. That you can either play it on the Xbox or the PC. But there are those exclusives. So I am tempted sometimes, but it's just really a matter of time, to be honest.
Okay, yeah. I totally understand. So let's swing that way. Now, I do warn you, listeners, Neomaster's a host of a podcast, so it's a bit weird being in the other chair where you're not actually driving the action forward, isn't it, sir?
Oh, a little bit, but I'm more than happy to go with whatever you throw at me.
Well, look, that's exactly how this show works. So, look, why don't we jump in? You do have 1.5 million gamer score. Now, when we were talking the other night, I didn't realize as you said, you've been around since the beginning of achievements, or early on in the achievement cycle. You've been playing. I think this is fair to say. Correct me if you don't like the terminology. You've been playing fairly hardcore for the last 10 years.
Yeah, roughly or so. I mean, it was. Yeah, I would say so. I earned my first achievement. Not to go too far back into history, but I got my first Xbox from my first paycheck of my first ever summer job. I spent the entirety of it on a used Xbox and a copy of Gears of War, and I earned my first achievement on the 7th of the 7th of the 7th.
That's fantastic.
So that's always been a very important date for me, and I thought it was quite fitting. It wasn't intentional, that's just kind of how it worked out. And so I was really interested in the achievement system immediately. And so I started getting into it, but I didn't really start getting into the really hardcore trying to move up leaderboards kind of stuff until, for about the last sort of 10 years.
Yeah, that's cool. So look, 10 years is a long time. Like we see a lot of people, definitely on the PlayStation side, but I'm sure it's the same on the Xbox side too. A lot of people come in, they hit pretty hard early on, or at some point, and then they sort of die away. They're sort of done. To sustain that amount of time gaming. And I know we always hear these people like, oh, I would play the games if the achievements didn't exist, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I understand that. But what has driven you forward? Because 10 years of achievement hunting, and whatever you say, it's pretty hardcore, because I've looked at your graph from 2011 until today. It's always upwardly increasing. You haven't had any major dips in there. So what's pushed you on that whole time?
uh, I'm not actually sure. Like I think it's a combination of things, as most motivations are. Part of it is that like I just love video games to start with.
Mm,
Like in my opinion, I think it's probably the greatest hobby on earth in terms of versatility, in terms of community, in terms of competitiveness, in terms of artistic expression. It has all the things. It has all the best and worst parts of everything that people do,
mm.
in my opinion. And that's always been the thing first and foremost. Is that like I've just loved video games, and even before the achievement system, like I played way too much of the PlayStation 1 and 2 before achievements were even a thing. I was always a big completionist. I always tried to finish as many games as possible. Um, I mean, like I'm not to say that I haven't hit slumps. I haven't run into stuff where I'm like, like I look at my collection of games that I have, and I'm like, I don't want to play any of these. Why do I do this? It's not always up, but part of it is it's just such a big part of my life and a big part of my community. And now that I have a podcast that I host, and a big part of a community that I work, a couple of achievement hunting communities that I'm part of, and those common interests, and being able to be part of those, and play games with people, but also help people. I've been, like you said, I've been doing this for a long time. I've gathered a lot of experience over what games are good, what games are difficult, what my opinions are about these kinds of stuff. And people actually come to me and ask questions about games that I played years ago. And I'm not always able to remember because there are quite a few of them, but it is really a nice feeling to be able to support people who are in different parts of their achievement hunting sort of journey.
Yeah, I like it's almost like a mentor, isn't it? Like you can see all the pitfalls that are about to fall down.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm not by any means the greatest gamer of all time. I've got there's certain stuff where I'm sure one of my co-hosts Cameron would tell you that like I should never be put behind the wheel of a racing game, and no one should ever take my opinions on those seriously ever, because like I just don't have the skill for that kind of stuff. But yeah, like I find myself moving more into that mental position as the years have gone on, just in that I've just been doing this for longer than most people.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. I'm going to pick you up there because you made this wonderful comment the other night on your podcast there, and I had never considered it before, but it's perfect comment really. And you described yourself as an endurance gamer, not a skilled gamer. I really like that. I have a feeling that there's many high level trophy hunters and achievement hunters that probably fit under this category. But was that in jest, or are you quite serious about that? That it's more a war of attrition than skill. Like you must have a fair bit of skill.
I mean, I've it's kind of it's a hard one. Like it is partially in jest because I definitely have picked up some skills in video games in the way that playing a wide variety of games gives you a level of adaptability to be able to jump between genres and understand mechanics, and be able to understand shortcuts and quick and systems and patterns and things like that. And it's something that I've always been relatively good with, even in my day-to-day life.
Mm.
In terms, the problem is that when you play 1,700 games over the last 13 years, you never play one thing long enough to really develop a skill set for that one particular game. So games that have high skill ceilings, things like character action games, like say like Devil May Cry, um, things like I mean in multiplayer stuff. Like I'm okay at, like I'm okay at say like single player shooters, but anything that involves competition or multiplayer, or getting really good at Twitch gaming, and then like fighting games and driving, like I just don't really have. And driving is kind of iffy, but fighting games I'm particularly bad at in terms of remembering commands, having good timing. A lot of that is about understanding the way characters are and really getting a feel for them, and spending a lot of time with them. Whereas just like I don't spend a lot of time with any game if I can help it because I just don't have it.
I like that. So, is it fair to say this? Now, this is a question. This is a purely selfish question here, Nia. So you have to indulge it. But we have a similar points tally on different systems. Although perhaps I acquired my through 5 minute games as opposed to you that plays the whole catalog or whatever. But do you feel this drive when you're playing? You've sort of alluded to it already. That time is the currency. If this is taking too long, I could be on to another game. Do you feel that sort of pushing you forward almost? And therefore, are you the dreaded cutscene skipper, I suppose?
Oh, see, look, yeah, I do. So, and not to bring up too many of my co-hosts, but Kirby, uh, the Chin Doctor, previous host of the Real Gamerscore podcast, he is a notorious cutscene skipper, and him and I have butted heads on this many times.
Mm.
Uh, to answer your question, yes and no. I think time is a currency, but the thing is that I happen to be in a relatively good position in terms of I'm quite time rich for the most part. In terms of I work from home, um, I don't have a huge amount of other responsibilities. Like I don't have children. I do have a fiance, but she puts up with this. God knows why. And it's not like, yes, time is definitely important, and I always take that into consideration when choosing a game.
Mm.
But I'm like, if a game grabs me, I'm not afraid to put in 25 to 100 hours, depending on what it is. Like I have started things like Dragon's Dogma, and like I love JRPGs. I wish I had more time to play them. Again, the thing is that most of what I play these days is shorter games. However, listeners of the Real Gamerscore podcast will know that I put it on myself to not buy a single game in 2020. Was that my New Year's resolution? I bought about 10 of them, so I didn't quite hit what I was after. But that was a drop in the bucket compared to what I used to buy. If you look at my tag, for example, I bought most of those games that are on there over the last few years. I would go into a sale, look for anything that was low ratio, easy achievements, short gameplay, and just pick it up no matter what the sale was, even if it was 20% off. And so me changing that mindset has also changed how I view games in terms of, well, I'm not on the treadmill anymore. I'm not just buying games, adding them to my collection, and never playing them. So, I don't, when I look at like a 25-hour game, I think, oh, that's fine. Like it has to get done at some stage. It's on my backlog. It's on my list. I have to do it. I might as well do it now. I don't have to do all of it now, but I'm probably going to, just because of the way I play games. So for example, like I'm playing through Plague Tale Innocence on the Windows 10 version. I've already done the Xbox One version, when it came out a couple years ago. That's a 15 to 20 hour completion. But I love it. I am skipping the cutscenes this time, but normally I wouldn't, because I am actually there for the game most of the time. But there is definitely a distinction between what's an achievement game and what's actual a gameplay game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, and I just want to pursue this line a little bit, if it's okay with you. If you don't want to go down this route,
No, go for it.
by all means, tell me. But I'm really interested because you are the number one gamer in New Zealand. You recently were inducted into the Hall of Fame for being the number one gamer in New Zealand. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, I won the Xbox Hall of Fame competition. I
Mm.
came first in the Gamerscore and total achievements for New Zealand.
Yes. Look, I'm almost thinking of renaming this podcast just the Interviewing the Hall of Famers. Perhaps Microsoft will throw me some love, maybe even a little trophy for me, because I'm never going to get one over on this side. But what what I wanted to ask about this is it obviously getting to number one was great. It's fantastic. It's important. Is staying there important to you now, or does it not matter?
Not really. I mean, to be fair, my goal was never to be number one. That was never the real consideration. The leaderboards themselves, it's a nice to have. In the same way that having a gamer score 1.5 million is like, it's nice. Like I like it, and I've it's a good show of how hard I've worked on these games over the years. But really, my goal has just been to complete as many games as possible and to just wring as much out of all of them as I can. And the best way for me to do that, in my mind at least, in a way that hits the dopamine switch, is to complete all the achievements in it. So I mean, if the games are all worth 200 points rather than 1,000, it doesn't really bother me. I don't pick things because they have high ratio or low ratios, or they have not many people have completed them or whatever. I just pick the games that I want to play for the most part, because I want to play them, and everything else is a nice to have.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, this is sort of harking back to what we were talking about the other night a little bit. But the longer you do this, if you're just playing for the score, you will burn out. That's what always seems to happen, or whatever. But if you're just playing what you want to play, and as you said, you keep up a pace because you're playing what you want to play as well. And I'm sure there's a few things in there that are a grind or whatever else. Perhaps not the most fun, but it just leads to having these massive scores, I think, and continuing on. So no, I totally understand that. We've hit the thing that interests me the most about you is that you are a completionist, and you have a very, you do, as we said, you have a very high score. On the PlayStation side, there's only a handful of what we'd call completionists in the top 50 or so in the world. Most of those are completionists because they only play the easy short games. They'll avoid playing anything of substance, or not. I shouldn't say substance, but anything of substantial length. Although going through your card, it looks like you'll basically play anything. So do you have like a favorite genre, or do you just enjoy everything?
Yeah, I've been asked it a few times, and it is a bit of a tricky question. I don't really have a favorite as such. I mean, to put it in perspective, if people ask me, oh, what's your favorite game or what's your favorite series, like I usually default to something like Dark Souls in terms of has a good achievement list, has a reasonable level of difficulty, is a good length of a game, has an interesting narrative. Like it's sort of the original Dark Souls, in my opinion, is kind of almost the perfect video game in terms of everything that I look for in a video game.
Mm.
Um, not to say that it's overly difficult. I mean, I know that that's sort of their tagline, but so I do quite like the sort of. I'm definitely probably RPGs are probably one of my favorites. I like the sort of standard action adventure, but I'm also big into narrative. Like narrative I'm much more of a narrative over gameplay kind of guy. I mean, like I love a game that plays well. Something like a Dark Souls or a Metal Gear Solid 5, for example, is a classic example of amazing gameplay with not as great story. But I would say, like, one of my favorites would be, say, Metal Gear Solid 3, for example, which has much rougher controls, but I prefer the narrative for it. And also that includes things like visual novels and things like that, although I don't play too many of them because most of them don't have achievements.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's we are so opposite in the way we game. It's just amazing. So, I think as I sort of alluded to last week when we spoke to Cameron. I mean, he and I are very similar, or whatever else, and we're playing our way through 5% of the whole library. I think that's the aim, or something bizarre. So I do have a lot of respect for what you're doing. Now we will jump over shortly, listeners, to what Neo's been playing, because there's a couple here that I see, including a racing game, sir, that I intend to ask you about. And then I'm going to give you a little warning here just so you know that it's coming. I wasn't sure what we'd sort of focus on today, listeners, because in the episode the other night, we covered so many things on the Real Gamer Score. And as I said, I didn't want to come back to that stuff. So what I thought, with your permission, sir, is we might talk, after we've talked what you've been playing, we might spend a little time on Neverwinter. I know that it's a long-term passion of yours, I can see here, of about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, passion is one way to put it, but no, I'd love to talk about Neverwinter.
Good. So let's put a pin in that and we'll come to it. But first off, let's go over to what you've been playing. Now, the other night you talked about Resident Evil, correct me if I'm wrong, Resident Evil 3, the Japanese stack. Was that correct?
Yes, it was.
So, look, I've got to ask you, are you a massive Resident Evil fan? Are you playing all of them, or have you played them all?
I've played quite a few of them. Resident Evil is one of those, especially the older ones. You start getting into that skill based gameplay where it's okay. I need to know how many bullets it takes to take down a zombie because I don't have that many. The survival horror genre is something that I quite enjoy, but I'm also not terribly good at. Something like that, or the more action side of things, it gets a little tricky. But so, for example, I've played through, Resident Evils 4, 5, and 6. I played quite a bit of 7. I played Revelations. I played 3, the remake, but I haven't played 2, I haven't played 1 or 0, the remakes they did of those.
Okay, now I got to ask then, as a trophy hunter to an achievement hunter, or perhaps as well, why the Japanese stack?
Well, because it was there, basically. It's like I actually quite enjoyed playing through Resident Evil 3. It was one of the few games that I played that was from 2020. I didn't buy it, I rented it, but yeah, and it's a relatively easy game. It's pretty enjoyable, but I mean, if you look at ratios, you're looking at like 1.1 to 1.3, which is deceptively low because there is definitely still some challenge in it. But yeah, I quite like it was a short game, and you get a rocket launcher and you get to blow things up. So it's quite enjoyable, and I like the idea of what Capcom's done with those remakes, where they've taken original games that were impenetrable to say the least in terms of tank controls, and the graphics are kind of rough, but gotten what was really sort of appealing about those games to people and sort of modernized them in a way that hasn't lost the spirit of the originals.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, now look, I like the idea of playing Resident Evil, but then especially the early ones, as you said, with the tank controls, it just irritates the fuck out of me. I see you're playing 4 at the moment. Is this the first time you've played 4?
So yeah, I played 4 a few times. So 4, I think Resident Evil 4 also rivals Skyrim in terms of a number of re-releases they've had over the years. I played the original on the GameCube, actually, where it originally came out. Fantastic game, loved it to bits. Also scared the hell out of me. I was much too young to be playing that, but it was such a great game. Especially the beginning. I would say the village, the first act of the game is just so incredible in terms of atmosphere, and just making you feel isolated, but also moving it away from the sort of claustrophobic feeling that you would have in, say, the original Resident Evils were in a mansion or, on the city streets. But so I would say, so I played it, that one. I've done the 360 version, and now I'm doing the Xbox One version for Warboats, which is a true achievements competition.
Yes. Okay, good. Now, look, I'm going to have to ask you this because there's no way in hell I'm ever going to finish this. And I suppose it's spoilers because, whatever, it's an ancient game. If you haven't finished it, you probably never are either. I believe this is the one with the president's daughter. I think that's right. I think I got that far,
Yes.
all 3 minutes into it. Do you save her in the end or not? I need to know.
Yes. Yes. So I was joking about this actually because I just finished the last boss just before we started recording actually.
Yes.
Uh, And yeah, I was joking to someone. I was like, "Oh, look, I've just shot a rocket launcher at the final boss. You escaped you escaped the island, which is now blowing up for some reason,
Hmm.
on the back of a jet ski. And then the president's daughter propositions you for sex, which you turn down. So it's in a very interesting game. The Japanese have a very interesting way of interpreting American culture. I have to say, it's yeah, the game is pretty by the numbers, but thinking back on when it came out as compared to Resident Evil 3, for example, it was a huge change, and that over the shoulder camera sort of style of shooter, I mean, basically pioneered things like Gears of War and so many other games after that. So it really is the godfather of those things in a lot of ways. I mean, you can't you can't walk while you're shooting, which is still one of those things that I'm glad they changed up in the later games, but you can still see the DNA of so much of what happened in the industry over the next 10 years.
Yeah, I like that. And there you go, listeners. You can't say we don't talk Resident Evil. That is your quota for the year because there's sure as hell no way I'm going to be playing any more of them this year, I think. But I do like listening to them. Now, I want to ask you about one more and then I'll get you to throw some out. Mantis Burn Racing. I've played this game twice with the Japanese stack. How are you finding it? And you've already admitted you're not a racing fan. So why this game?
Yeah, look, again, it's one of those ones that I wish I hadn't played, to be honest. Anyone who can see the tag see that I do not have a couple of the discontinued achievements, which is a real bugbear of mine because it means that I will no longer be able to finish that game. I also had no idea that the online servers were going down, but apparently no one did, so I was just very, very unlucky.
Mm.
I really wasn't playing it for very much. I had again Warboats. One of the achievements that I needed was on there. Turned out not to be a hit, unfortunately. But I figured I'd go for it and get it out of the way. But I really have not been playing too much of it. I have played a bit of it in the past. I got about maybe halfway through it, but it's really kind of pushing me in a way that I'm not super enjoying. In terms of racing games, I'm like even for racing games, that's kind of a weird one with the interesting perspective and kind of the RC Pro Am style over the top, which I'm really not a fan of, to be honest.
Oh, it's so funny you mentioned that because I just had a flashback to my youth then. See, they were fantastic games. It's a funny game. I'm just looking here. Yeah, you got the DLC as well. When it launched, it was actually quite an easy plat or I suppose completion for you guys. But with that DLC that dropped, meaning you needed to actually finish everything, and I'll never forget. Maybe I didn't know the servers were down, but there's a trophy or achievement in this game, and I think it's in the ballpark. You needed to beat someone that was either 20 or 40 levels higher than you. I can't remember which one it was. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. And of course, if you played this at launch, there was nobody that was 20 or 40 levels ahead of you unless you knew someone. And there was only a handful of us, or in my group, playing it. So someone had to run up the second character and sort of do it like with the second account on that. I remember that game well, but yeah, I'm sorry to hear you're not finding it that great.
It is what it is, and like I wasn't quite what I expected going into it. I was expecting more of a sort of traditional racing game. It was one of those ones that I just bought on a sale that was I think it was like 90% off or something ridiculously cheap. So I was like, oh yeah, looks interesting. The achievements don't look too bad. This was again before the DLC, and so I'd planned on just completing it and being done with it, but it just never happened.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Now, what is this? I saw you playing this probably the other week or something, and it intrigued me, but then I couldn't figure out how to find it on the store, so I just gave up. This Darwinia, is it, or Darwinia Plus?
Darwinia.
Yes.
So Darwinia is an RTS, actually. Technically, it's a very interesting RTS that's based on very sort of vector style greens and think like classics 70s and 80s monitors style of game where it's very low res. You essentially are pulled into a computer and you have to help. There's a doctor there who said, "Oh, look, I have created life on a computer, but there's also, some of it's become corrupted and trying to destroy my system. So I need you to go around and clean up, basically just destroy all these viruses with these Darwinians, move them around, command them, get upgrades, that kind of stuff." It's a very sort of basic RTS that I've been enjoying quite a bit, but it's one of those. It's one of my dreaded non-backwards compatible 360 games, of which I have a short list of games that are not compatible with the new consoles from the Xbox One
Mm.
onwards. So they have to be completed on the 360. And until I finish them, I won't be able to pack away my ancient machine that I've got sitting here in front of me.
It's not an original though, is it? Surely.
No, it is not. That was that got the Red Ring many years ago, but it's one of the second. It's the Jasper, so
Oh
it was
wow.
the second release that they
Yeah,
did.
it's doing well then.
So I've had it for a long
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. I'm impressed that you can go back because through our Patreon, the listeners they'll be laughing now. They can set a game for me to play or whatever, and some banana set Deadly Premonition. I'm not sure if you've played it. It's a horrific game.
Oh, oh, you kidding me? I love Deadly Premonition is one of my favorite games of all time.
It's incredibly janky.
Oh, no, it's absolutely. It is like that. That is like when I was talking about how narrative over gameplay. That is almost the number. Let's poster child for that.
Yeah.
Whereas the story in that game is so interesting and strange, and could only come out of the mind of a madman. But the gameplay is just incredibly bad.
it's, it's so funny you're passionate about that game because I looked at it on the Xbox and now you correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think on the Xbox One with backwards compatibility, it was only the main Deadly Premonition. It wasn't the director's cut, which is an easier completion, I'm told.
Yeah, so the director's cut never actually came out for the Xbox. I believe that was a PlayStation
That's what it
exclusive.
was.
So yeah,
Yes.
the original the game itself on the Xbox is a relatively simple completion. The only issue with it is that you have to play through it 3 times because the difficulties don't stack.
Mm.
So you have to play through hard, normal and easy, which is a little bit of a drag, especially for a game where the narrative is the key thing and you have to experience it 3 times in a row.
That's right. That's right. And well, that was the reason that I wanted the director's cut. But of course, director's cut is only on the PS3, and I haven't touched that thing in years. And so I put it on, and it just died. It wasn't going to happen, or whatever else. And I considered playing it on the Xbox, but I didn't consider playing it 3 times. And so now it's on the PC because you can get that version on the PC. So I'm chipping away at it, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm missing maybe I'm missing the thrill of it at the moment. But I'll get into it. But look, we went on deviation. I completely lost my train of thought there, listeners. I'm just scared of that game. I think so. Anyway, it will come back to me. But so Darwinia RTS games. This is interesting. Is this a genre you play much of?
Not really. It's a genre that it's one of those genres that I actually quite like, but I'm bad at. So fighting games I don't like and I'm bad at. Driving games I don't like and I'm bad at. But RTS I absolutely love, but I'm also shockingly terrible at in terms of micromanaging units and trying to come up with good build compositions. I tend to be more in the command and conquer side of things, where it's build 50 tanks and just roll them over the enemy base and just hope for the best.
Yeah.
So not so much strategy as just again war of attrition.
Yeah. It's so funny this came up because, as I said, I didn't know this game or whatever. But at the moment, I'm playing Aegis Rim, the 13 Sentinels game, which
Oh yes.
it's a fantastic game, and it's sort of half visual novel but half RTS. And look, there might be other games in this visual novel category that are like this, but I've never played one. It's the first time I've played something like this. Now, I don't think it's unfortunately available on the Xbox, but PC or whatever, or PlayStation. And I know you have a little interest in visual novels. Perhaps down the track, if this somehow crosses your systems or even through PC or something, it might be worth a look because the RTS in it, from what you're saying, it's not in this I guess room. It's not too complicated because that's what always scares me is that there's so many options. There's the grid is so wide and there's all this movement going on. It's very fair game or whatever, and in the leveling up, and it's a wonderful, like, who would have thought it would go well with a visual novel, but it actually does seem to as well, which is just it's fantastic, I suppose.
I've been hearing a little bit about it. I believe Giant Bomb was talking about it, and I heard about it on their podcast. So I've looked at a few videos because I'd never heard of it before, and yeah, I was just fascinated by the sort of interesting mix of art of the sort of strategy style tower defense mixed with a very intricate visual novel that has a really heavy narrative thread on it.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I don't want to bore you here, but we'll go down this path, slightly, I suppose, in our listeners, because it's really the only thing I'm playing at the moment, and I think it's definitely one of my favorite games from last year. And I know, Giant Bomb and a lot of the sites, IGN as well, hailed it or whatever. Not only is it's a beautiful game in 2D art style or whatever else, but it's not. It's fully voiced in English as well, although you can listen in Japanese if you so wish, and it's not your straightforward and standard visual novel. It's without getting too far into it, it's all about time travel. We have three split times or whatever else from the 2085, 1985, and 1944. It focuses on, and so traveling between these times, but a visual novel that uses a flow chart, but uses a flow chart in such a way that you can only play certain characters to certain points in their story, and then you have to move other characters forward if you like, and you actually have to play the deviations, if you like, of the character within the flow chart, as well, to move other things forward. So it's very much like, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this game, Neo. AI, the Somnium Files. Unfortunately, it's another one not on Xbox.
No, I haven't actually. That's a new one to me.
Yeah, I mean, these are all great games, but look, we won't go down that path, other than to say it's well worth looking at. Now, is there something else you'd like to throw out there that you've been working on?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned sort of Plague Tale Innocence, and I think I'm quite glad that I got a chance to go back to this. So I'm playing this through Game Pass on PC. There's a stack for it, so I decided I might as well double dip on it and go into it.
Of course.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Plague Tale is essentially it's kind of one of those action adventure. It's hard to define a genre, but mostly it's action adventure. TA says it's a stealth game, which I suppose is fair. You play as you play as a pair of siblings who are formerly of a noble house, and a horrific tragedy occurs, and they need to make themselves scarce, basically, without giving too much away. And there is a massive plague that is going through. Going through. I'm trying to think of the time period. There's a lot of references to the Crusades and Knights. So to give you an idea, it's sort of medieval France being invaded by the English, and so you end up in a lot of situations sneaking between the two battlegrounds and trying to escape and figure out why your family what happened to your family, and also why these inquisitors are so interested in getting their hands on your brother, who has seems to have some sort of strange connection with the plague.
Yes.
And it's yeah, such a really like a well told story from a studio that I don't know if it might have been their first game, or close to their first game. I think in terms of like their first sort of big narrative, like um like mainstay game that sort of broke the mold. I wouldn't say it's AAA in terms of quality. It's a little bit of jank to it, but in terms of voice acting and story, and even the gameplay is still pretty good, even as sort of a sort of stealth, vision cone, distract the kind of guy and sneak behind him kind of gameplay gets a little bit repetitive.
Mhm.
I would say, yeah, like it's kind of riding that line in a sort of level of game that we don't really see anymore. It's that kind of double A, not massive, Ubisoft millions of budget, thousands of people working on it, but also not like an indie, 5-person team sort of thing.
Yeah, you're right. It sits in the middle, and of course, if you haven't played this one, listeners, what the fame for this game, I suppose, the claim to fame is to see how many rats they can fit on the screen at once without sort of crashing it or whatever
It's
else.
incredible.
It is incredible, isn't it? I mean, we're obviously not in spoilers, but through that last section, it's kind of amazing. But it is funny you bring up the stealth element, because when I started this game, like, I don't play a lot of stealth games. It's not a preferred genre for me, and there is a lot of stealth in this game or whatever else, and it's not. I wouldn't put that as a detraction. If you're not a stealth game player, I think you can still get through this or whatever else. I want to ask you, because you're a completionist, you're going to complete it. You've completed it before. One of the problems I had, because I played a little bit blind or whatever, was the resource management, because you didn't get enough resources to max out everything if you didn't use them in the right way. If you just use them however
Hmm.
you want. Now, I've been told. Now, I don't know if you do this or not. So if you find this disgusting, we'll just, of course, move on. But I've been told there is a glitch for that. Is that correct? That you can, in a certain area, farm resources or something like this? Is that the standard
Yes,
practice?
I believe there is. I don't actually know what the glitch is. I have been told about it. When I did my original playthrough of the game, I basically played it at launch, so there weren't really any guides. I was very lucky. I had just enough resources at the final checkpoint
Uh,
to be able to get that achievement for upgrading the all your things. I was like one or two materials away from having to redo pretty much that whole game. So this time I'm going through with a guide, and I'm basically combing the world with a fine tooth comb, because I know what to expect, and I know where the beats are, and I know what to upgrade in what order. I'm a lot more prepared, so it's going to hopefully go a lot smoother. So hopefully I won't need to use the glitch, because really the upgrades themselves don't add a huge amount to the game. There is one particularly useful one that allows you to shoot 2 stones at once from your sling, but that is a sort of late game upgrade. It would be potentially useful to get that earlier on, but like you were talking about with the stealth, the game is very much a narrative focused game, and so the gameplay itself is, while good, is very well signposted, and there's not it's the puzzle aspect of trying to figure out how to get through an area is not huge. There's usually a couple of good solutions around, knocking out lights so rats attack people, or distracting them, or taking out a guy who doesn't have a helmet, so the guys with helmets will go and look over there and try and find where he went, so you can sneak around, along with a bunch of other different tricks. But like, again, they give you a lot of options, and the game itself is a relatively simple completion.
Yeah. And I know we're dwelling on this game a bit, but one of the things I love so much, and I believe this game is on Game Pass, or at least it was at some point or whatever, is that this game, I think, got lost on the PlayStation completely. A few people played it here and there, and it got a bit of traction, but it sort of definitely died away. And it's one of those little hidden gems that, yes, I know you have to go out and buy it on our side or whatever else, but it's really worth your time and your money. And as Neo said, like 12 to 15 hours or so, with maybe a little bit of guide work if you're worried about those resources, but well worth your time playing. Now, there's one more I want to ask you about here, only because it's a series that I never played, going through the PlayStation, obviously, and it's been set as a challenge for me through some podcasting friends. It's the first Gears of War game. Now, I see you're playing the second one here, the Japanese stack. Am I going to enjoy this? Do you think is this a killer series or not? I hear everyone going on about it, but is it true? Is the first one that good?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, you need to take it in the context. I definitely have probably some rose tinted glasses in terms of the first game. Partly because it was the one and only game that I had for the 360 when I bought it, so I played it to death. When in terms of completing the game, with the challenge, are you trying to do all the achievements, or are you just looking to finish the narrative and kind of just go through and not really worry about the multiplayer?
Yeah, well, look, I am trying to maintain my 40% completion percentage. So to do that, I will just be playing the story. That's right. Yes.
Gotcha. Perfect. Oh, and in that case, you could pretty much get it done in a day. The narrative itself is actually quite short. Definitely best played with another person. It was one of the early Xbox games that encouraged co-op, and to use the Xbox Live system. So that was always a big thing, and that was kind of my first experience of online play with a person. I got up to the final boss on the hardest difficulty, and I could not manage it by myself. So I went out and bought Xbox Live Gold, and joined a lobby and had a guy help me out. I didn't have a headset, so I could hear him talking, so I would move back and forth for yes and left and right for no. Like it was very interesting. Like it was a really sort of a great way of kind of getting into that sort of online space, because I wasn't a big PC gamer or anything like that. Like, because I wasn't playing a lot of MMOs or anything like that before that. So it was my first sort of experience with sort of online console gaming. Yeah, I mean, look, if you go through and you play through it on like the normal difficulty with a co-op partner, there are 5 acts. The 5th act is very, very short. They cut out quite a bit that they put back in the PC release. I would recommend doing the Ultimate Edition if you have a choice. It's essentially the same game, but reworked to look a bit nicer and run a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to go back to the original, it really was it was really the progenitor. It was one of those things that it came after, like we said, Resident Evil 4 with that over-the-shoulder camera, but it really pioneered the chest-high wall, everything being dogshit brown and gunmetal gray, and just really, po-faced, super serious, macho. Like it basically spawned an entire genre. Is kind of the way I'd put it. It was that and Call of Duty 4. So Call of Duty 4 basically reinvented the FPS genre, and Gears of War basically created the third-person shooter genre in terms of things like Army of Two and Vanquish and a lot of those kinds of styles of games. I mean, they've kind of go in different directions, but you can all see the, oh look, there's a bunch of chest high walls. There's definitely going to be a fight here. Better get my gun ready.
Mhm. I love these sort of things for the story and the campaign, not for, and I imagine, we don't need to dwell on it if you don't like, but I imagine the achievement lists for these games are not that pleasant. I imagine there's some bullshit hidden in there as well.
Well, again, you have to remember that the early stages of achievements, the first couple of years were very, very rough. If you look at things like another third person shooter example would be Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, which has is one of those games that I wish I'd never started. It was actually, I think, the second game that I played. I rented it from a Blockbuster back when they still existed. Uh, and I thought, oh, I want to play a different game other than Gears of War, so I'll play something that's almost exactly like Gears of War. Um, it has three achievements in it. One for getting to the top of the solo leaderboards, one for getting to the top of the team leaderboards, and one for getting top of the universal leaderboards.
Wow.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. One of the essentially, I've told myself that I ever get those achievements, I'm going to have to seriously think about retiring because I would have spent the current grind for that is about 8 months.
Oh wow. Is that an aim then, or is
I mean, look, if I finish literally everything else, I might consider it. Um, but there is a leaderboard blocker who is sitting at the top of that at the moment and making sure that no one else can get it. He is also the person who is at the top of the Kane and Lynch leaderboards, uh,
yes.
which has been a controversial matter at the moment because there've been a team of people who have managed to get past him, but he has been fighting tooth and nail to get past.
It's so funny these type of achievements because we have a trophy hunter coming up in the next few weeks and you'll have to forgive me here, listeners. He recently platted or last year. It's one of these fighting games. It's an older fighting game from the PS3 genre, and it has a similar thing where so you have to hold the belt or whatever else, and of course one person holds the belt and they can choose not to play, and so therefore locking it away from everyone, and there's an interesting method that was used to acquire this and to remove the belt from him and bring it back into circulation. But we'll get into that next week. Other than to say that these sort of things are total bullshit, I think.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's also so funny that you talk about without a headset moving back and forward because that is exactly the way I played the Division and the Division 2 in a team of four with no conversation, just slowly moving left and right to indicate our decisions, which I love.
It's the universal language. Everyone understands it. You don't have to speak English, French, or Japanese. You just move back and forth, and everyone knows that is yes, this is no. Do you have this item? Is this gear better than this one? Do you need to do this mission?
That's right. And when you get shot in the face, you know that you fucked up. It's
Yeah, exactly.
it's a wonderful thing. I like that. Now, before we move over to Neverwinter, and I'm very keen to talk about this one, I want to ask, we're recording literally, a few hours away from the median dropping now on the Xbox. It's the first, next gen game, I suppose, for the Xbox, solely for the Xbox Series X and PC. Are you eager to play this game? I know there's been a little bit of information come out about it. It looks like it's around an 8 to 10 hour experience. So that's quite a nice length for this style game, I think. Are you keen on this or not so much?
Very much so. I'm a big fan of Bloober Team and their previous works. I've got played through and completed Layers of Fear 1 and 2, and I've also completed Observer. And also the Blair Witch game that they came out with a couple years ago. So I'm very, very interested to see what they can do with the power of the next gen consoles, or current gen, I should say, these days. I don't think I'll be playing it immediately. I tend to be a relatively patient gamer, usually because you run into things. Part of the reason is you run into things like Cyberpunk, where the game's just kind of messed up to start with, and also because I like getting an idea of what the guides are, what missables are. Because while I like to play games relatively blind, I don't like to have everything spoiled for me before I go into it. I do like to know what to look out for to make sure that I don't have to spend more time playing a game than I need to.
Yeah, I can understand that. And as the listener knows, Nia, so I do apologize. This is a very relaxed show. There's no show notes here or whatever. It just goes from thing to thing. So as I said, you're doing great. I hope that's not annoying you, that it is
No, it's
spoilers.
perfect.
But I want to ask you now because you brought up the Blair Witch. Look, I started the Blair Witch on the Xbox because I believe it came on Game Pass maybe early on. Perhaps it's still there. I don't know.
Yes, I believe it is still there.
Yeah, so I didn't have to pay for it. So I was like, I'm going to give it a try or whatever. Played 5 minutes. Yeah, I got into this. So I'll pick it up for the PlayStation. I did that and I got further into it. And one of the things I wanted to ask you here. One of the things that really grated my goat in this game was that sort of time loop mechanic. I didn't get far. I got to it was a tree had fallen down or something, and you had to use the camera, to move things around. And it wasn't what I was expecting in that game at all. I think do you have any comments on the game? Did you enjoy it? Like, did you like those sort of mechanics? I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, the game takes. You can tell that the game takes a lot from predecessors, things like Outlast, with the sort of camcorder mechanics and the low light sneaking around, not having any way to fight the monsters, sort of thing. Um, I liked a lot of it. I feel like it dragged a bit and got a bit muddled in terms of its messaging. And mechanically, it's not a very complex game. Like I don't think it didn't really need to be as long as it did. I understand kind of what they were going for the narrative. It was quite interesting in relation to the original movie and that kind of stuff and what they sort of harken back to. And I did quite enjoy it from a narrative perspective. But yeah, the sort of puzzle mechanics, like they didn't really do it for me either. I kind of just looked at a guide for the most part. Like I was like, okay, I kind of get what I need to do here.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of collectibles, which is something that I'm not a huge fan of, especially just collectibles for collectibles' sake. Because again, like you end up just looking at the guide. Okay, where's the next one? Okay, play until I get to the next bit. And you're just constantly looking up and down, which is really not the way I like to play games. But unfortunately, just given the reality of what I do, is just kind of how things usually pan out.
Yeah, I like that. And of course, you're given a dog as well. So, well, I mean, unless it's Call of Duty Ghosts, it's probably a good thing, having a dog in a game, I suppose. So I do like that. I want to ask you now, I'm very conscious of spoilers here, and I know people will want to play this game. So we probably can't say outright, but, would you encourage me? My most favorite part in the movie, the part that I found terrifying, I thought was wonderful. It stayed with me from when I was a lot younger in the cinema when we watched it in that opening week, was that section where he's standing up in the house in the forest and he's sort of looking straight at the wall. He's right at the wall. He's muttering, and that it's a wonderful moment in the film of sheer terror as you start to realize what's going to happen to him and all of this. Am I going to have a similar situation towards the latter end of the game? Should I continue playing for this, or should I not hold my breath?
I don't know. I mean, like again, like that sort of scene has been harkened back to so many times. I mean, even Resident Evil 7, for example, has a lot of that. Like basically, almost rips it off. The very sort of prologue of that game basically rips off the Blair Witch almost scene for scene, in terms of that stuff. It doesn't quite get to that level, I don't think. But the game I found is short enough that I feel like if you're not going for the full completion and needing to play through it again on the hardest difficulty and do all that kind of stuff, just getting to the end of it, I was quite interested. There was a lot of, it's a very psychological game. There's a lot around, okay, what's real and what isn't. It does suffer from the usual thing of the monsters are scary when you don't see them. But the more you get caught by them, the more you get damaged by them, the more that you see them in your face and they just become an annoyance. The sort of the effect wears off, and that's true of any game like this. I mean, even Alien Isolation, which I think is almost perfectly encapsulate that sort of stealth, terrifying, just like shit. I need to do something. I need to get away from this horrific killing machine that learns. Even that, like when you get killed by the alien for the 20th time in the same section, you have to redo it. Like it just kind of loses its appeal and just becomes a trudge. And like I feel like that Blair Witch suffers from some of that a little bit. But depending on where you got up to, like I mean, it sounds like you're probably. I mean, did you get past the minecart part?
This is where I'm at. Yes.
Yeah, the minecart. That's about halfway through. Like there's. And most of what you do after that is story. There is a little bit of sneaking around, but a lot of it is just kind of wandering around in the dark for a bit, getting a bit of narrative stuff. And like, don't be afraid to use a guide for this one. To be honest, like it's more about the experience itself rather than trying to figure out every puzzle and uncover the mystery. It's more about just kind of going through the experience and questioning what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame you say that because I subscribe to the horror, the psychological horror method that less is more, and it sounds like perhaps it suffers a little bit from the Little Hope Dark Pictures anthology.
A little bit, not quite that bad, but I think it does kind of lean sometimes a bit on that stuff.
Well, if you can't set your clock to it, then it's probably not Dark Pictures. So that's it's true though, isn't it? I mean, it's.
Well, I mean, to be fair to Supermassive, that they're unafraid in their tropiness. They know exactly what they're doing, and they play into it so heavily.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Look, and I did enjoy that game as well. So it sounds like you've played that game as well, or you're.
Yes, I played that and Man of Medan as well. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect, perfect. So what we might do, listeners, is we'll shuffle across to Neverwinter. And as I said, I wasn't sure what we were going to talk about because I wanted it to be different, to keep us interested or whatever else. And I didn't expect to find this game on your profile. If we're not familiar with it, listeners, it's a massive multiplayer open world role playing game, and that's not unusual on this show. But what's unusual is we're not going to talk about Final Fantasy 14. We're going to talk about Neverwinter instead. Now, I've never played this game, but it's fair to say you have really played this game. I see you have 190 of the 192 achievements. You've been playing it on and off, I imagine, like any MMO player does, for the past sort of 4 or 5 years or so. What do you love about this game? What attracted you to starting a game like this? Because these are massive investments, as I'm sure you've got on to realize.
Oh, I have found, yes.
So, what drew you in? Was it just a random? I'm going to try this tonight, or
Oh, this is embarrassing, but it was the greatest of all attractors, CJ. It was a woman.
Mm.
Uh it was it was again, this was it's been a long time, but this was a it was how much of this am I allowed to tell?
This is not going to go on. Is this going down the track of we got married in the game, and now in real life it just turned out perfectly for us both?
That's definitely it.
Oh, that's fantastic! I've never met
yeah,
one. I hear I from look now. Well, from Final Fantasy 14, I've been to weddings on that game. I hear about this happening all the time, but I've never spoken to anyone that has actually worked out for in real life like this.
no, I mean, like the reality is, it was a friend acquaintance that, well, actually, a very good friend of mine during my early achievement hunting days, who I got involved with through one of the communities. Again, this was a very very long time ago.
Hmm.
Um, and she was playing Neverwinter, and she was like, "Hey, look, I've got a guild that I run with a bunch of people. We'll play a bunch of it." She was yeah. Actually, I don't want to give it too many personal details, but people who know me know the story. And so I basically I have been known to succumb to peer pressure relatively easy. I have been nicknamed the man with a rubber arm in terms of getting me to start games that I really shouldn't be starting. Um, and this is pretty much the sort of the genesis of that. Whereas I started Neverwinter, I thought, well, I'll probably never finish it, but she was a very attractive woman. Um,
For the number of hours this has taken, she must have been.
yeah, and my fiance is looking at me, being like, "Oh, was she?" Yeah,
What happens in the game stays in the.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's don't worry about it, sweetheart. So, so but yeah,
This is a direction she didn't expect this to go in, I'm sure.
no, very much not. Well, I mean, she's heard the story too. Because it is one that I do, because I do get asked this question, because it is such a strange thing to show up on my tag,
Yeah.
with me being so militant about what I play.
Mm.
Um, and like so I started it. We played for quite a while. I played in a guild. After we basically broke up, I decided that it wasn't really for me, so I left the guild and kind of fell off the game for quite a few years. I had made quite a bit of progress in it, but it became one of those things that they kept releasing updates for, and I kept falling further and further behind, and just really just like, okay, well, look, I've got so many other things to do. And this was when I was in my prime achievement hunting and buying games and playing everything as the minute it came out, and just ripping through stuff.
Yeah.
So it became it became the source of shame on my tag, because it was one of those ones that, look at all that TA that I'm missing, look at all those achievements that I'm missing, and they just keep adding more and more title updates to it, and I'll never get around to it.
Yeah, I understand all that, but you don't. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't play these games, as you said, for achievements or whatever else, and you definitely don't continue with them as much as you want your completion percentage. I think they're a labor of love, and I always avoided these sort of games too, not because maybe for different reasons, like I'm not worried about completing it or whatever, but I just saw this massive time sink or time hole that you could fall into. And when I was thinking about starting Final Fantasy 14, or maybe I just jumped into it a couple of of years ago or whatever, and someone said, CJ, look, you really need to be careful because you're gonna run into people that live their better lives in these games. And I'm like, oh, that's ridiculous. That doesn't happen or whatever. And in that game, it really does. There are people like it's a joke, that's the Japanese housewife game or whatever, because you're probably playing with housewives, during the day. That's
Yeah,
such a
yeah.
thing, which is nothing wrong with that. It's you have some wonderful conversations, but there are people, and admittedly, I only drop in now and then to that game, but there are people that are always there. It's their game, they play or whatever else, and they know everything. Now, I'm not as familiar with this Neverwinter Night, so I'm not sure if that's a fair comparison, but I mean, is it a sort of a narrative that pulls you back, or is it more the gameplay loop that pulls you back?
I mean, narrative wise, it's almost nothing. I mean, it is so. Neverwinter is based on the Dungeons and Dragons universe.
Mm.
So anyone who's interested in the sort of tabletop stuff, along with these sort of traditional story, books and that sort of stuff from the 80s, will be very familiar with the tropes and the characters, and it's basically straight out of the player's handbook in terms of you've got Tomb of Annihilation, you've got the Underdark, you've got dark elves, you've got liches, you've got everything. Everything from Dungeons and Dragons gets crammed into the game. Everything's along the Sword Coast. You travel to Chult, and you do a lot of ancient ruins, and it's pretty much everything you could ever ask for in terms of like from a narrative, I guess, and sort of setting perspective. But in terms of the actual story, there isn't really a lot there. I skip all of it. Most people do. It's really about the gameplay loop, but it is full of free to play trappings.
Yes.
It's rotten with them actually. And so the people who make it are the same people who do Star Trek Online.
Mm.
So it is nothing but loot boxes, and most patches are usually not for the better in terms of value for money.
Mm.
I have put a fair amount of money into it over the years, not a huge amount, but I do every now and then when the premium currency goes on sale, I'll grab a bunch of it to use later down the line when things are on sale, or when my guildmates recommend, hey, we need this for a raid, or etc. etc. But I've had a very love-hate relationship with this game. And it's funny you talk about housewives, because that girl I was talking about was one of those people. She was a housewife. And that was her life, that she played this game. And like I couldn't have that kind of commitment to it, not just because I was I believe a student at the time, and then also moving into a job, and then having other parts of my life while also trying to maintain the gamer score stuff and finishing up my games. Like Neverwinter really just didn't fit in there. But part of the achievement community that I joined, so one of the previous hosts of the Real Gamerscore podcast, Planting 42, he was part of a guild, a guild on there on Neverwinter, along with a couple of my buddies Yoda and Frank. And they basically said, hey, look, we're still playing this. We're pretty much up to scratch. We're like maybe one expansion behind. Do you want to join our guild, and we'll kind of help you out and level you up and get you some good gear so you can go back and do all the old stuff.
Mm.
And I was like, oh yeah, you know what? Like I was looking for a social experience, and I think that's the thing that brings me back is that I tend to be a very sort of long-time listeners of the Real Gamerscore would know that I had a bit at the end of the show, depending on whether the episode was an odd numbered episode or an even number episode, where I would tell the audience that I loved them and wanted them to play all the games with them, or that they could fuck off and die. And so it took people quite a while to figure out what the bit was, and whether I was actually an asshole or just pretending to be one. But the thing is, like, I tend to be a very single player focused game. I'm sure you've gone through my tag and looked at a lot of stuff. I tend to be playing a lot of narrative based single player stuff with the occasional co-op experience. And having something that was, it was a time in my life when I wanted to be talking with people, and it's when I got more involved with Real Gamerscore before I started hosting on the show, when I was just a fan. And that was the kind of thing where it was like I wanted a group of people that I could get in touch with, and I could play with on the daily, and we could play with each other and just chat shit while doing some relatively menial stuff, and earn some achievements and work our way towards some of the the highest ratio achievements on the website.
Yes, well, which is very true, because I see it's or pushing 21,000 or something, achievement, true achievement there. Yeah, I like that. See, it's funny you bring that up, because I avoid playing co-op like the plague if I can. I'm a very much a single player gamer, and a lot of that's tied up with the work that I do and the hours that, it's very difficult for me to sit down, at a given time perhaps and play for 2 hours, for a raid or pre-raid and all this stuff that these sort of games demand. And I'm sure this game does similarly. Once you start something like this, you sort of have to see it through, and so my gaming's all over the place. So it becomes difficult. And one of the things that I liked about FF14 so much was that even though it's an MMO, you could play so much of that game as a single player, which I know sort of seems like it defeats the purpose. So I suppose that's what I'm interested in this Neverwinter. Is there elements of that in this game as well? Or as you've said, it's very much you need to be in that guild or within a group to
I mean, like the majority of what I've done is single player. It definitely helps to have maybe a group of maybe 2 or 3 other people who can help you out in terms of some of the weekly raids usually require either you need quite a high gear score to be able to solo them, or if you're just sort of starting out, it really helps to have other people who are there with you who can help explain mechanics. And also because they update things and change balances, I haven't really been keeping up. I log in every day for Neverwinter for my daily bonus, but so much of that game is solo. But I've sort of gotten to the stage where I've done all the solo content, and all that I really had left were about 5 or 6 achievements that really involved teamwork. One of which was finishing a skirmish, which is kind of like a mini raid that's basically just like a fight a few enemies and a tough boss fight with a few various stages rather than going through a whole dungeon. Complete that without any of your teammates dying on the hardest difficulty, for example. And so you needed 10 people for that, and you had to have none of them go down. So it required quite a bit of teamwork. But thankfully, the guild that I've joined recently are those kinds of people who play Neverwinter and nothing else. Like they have their own Discord server. They're always on top of it. They always have all the boons. They have the best builds. They're always on top. They always know exactly what needs to happen. They're always on top of the updates, and they let me know around. Okay, hey, this was best in slot. Now you need to change this to this. Work towards getting this. Hey, we'll help you with this dungeon. And they really helped me close the gap and sort of catch up on those last. I had maybe sort of 5 or so achievements that I was really struggling with because I didn't have a good dedicated group to go back to, because my group had sort of fallen off again. They had sort of fallen out with the latest updates. They weren't really happy with the way the monetization was working, so I had to find a new group. But these guys are even more hardcore than I am, and so I have these last 2 achievements. One for finishing the current skirmish, which is very, very difficult, and then one of them for finishing the previous skirmish, or 2 skirmishes back actually, which without dying, which is kind of it's the classic one that everyone runs. It's multi-stage. There's call outs, there's names for things. It's like someone says, okay, middle, left, back, flames, double hypo. Like you got to learn all this terminology. You got to look for signs. Like it's very, very involved in a way that almost like classic WoW style of like needing to know these phases and these stages inside and out, because they're not just, it's not just like clockwork. You need to be really ready for it. And obviously having no one go down during any of those fights is very, very difficult. And I don't know if I'll ever finish Neverwinter. They're coming out with a new mod. They call them mods, which is their sort of expansions with new achievements, new content. Coming out with a new large mod in February. So it remains to be seen what that looks like, if there'll be a new dungeon or how difficult the achievements will be. Sometimes they're relatively simple, and it's just, hey, do your dailies for like 2 months, and you'll get all the achievements. Sometimes it's, do the dungeon without dying. But they tend to have realized that people aren't very happy with those because they're very, very challenging, and they as time goes on, they tend to ease up the difficulty on some of these more difficult raids as less and less people play them as they get older.
You think? See, I know that a lot of what you say there, those last 2, it's probably very frustrating or whatever. But I'm sort of licking my lips on this side because, unfortunately, on the FF14 side, which I'm secretly hoping Phil Spencer will continue to work his magic in Japan as he's been doing, and somehow get that game across on the wonderful Xbox as well, so I can do it again, of course. But one of the travesties of that game with the current list is that you only need to play the base game. So all the content that's come out over the years, the expansions, they're not involved in the achievement or trophy list there at all. So obviously, you're playing it for the game or whatever, but there's no, external reward, I suppose, for doing that. And one of the other problems with that game is that they do have some extreme raids, or whatever else, but they're not to the level that you would see in WoW, or by the sound of it in this game, or maybe even Elder Scrolls Online with the difficulties. So I don't know. It definitely intrigues me. I want to ask one more thing about this because you sort of alluded to it. It is a totally free to play game at its base, though, isn't it?
Yes, yes, 100%. You can get in there free to play, but you will notice the trappings pretty quickly.
Yeah, so this is what I want to ask about because we have a few hardcore players in the listenership that they like to play these sort of games or whatever else. They're not afraid of the 1,000 or 2,000 hours that these things take. I know some of them are just approaching the end of Final Fantasy 14 or have done so. Last year it was all about these idle champions of the Forgotten Realm. I don't know if you know this game. Ironic
I know a little bit
in
about it.
the Dungeons and Dragons universe, but more of a clicker. Now, that's also a free to play game that is very clever at monetization as well, perhaps to even, stimulate your progress. At times it becomes very difficult without it. Is it possible to get through this Neverwinter without financial transactions, or is it very much geared to?
Um, I mean, you definitely can, but you need to put in a lot of hours. So the main thing that you'll be doing is farming equipment and farming diamonds. So you have a certain allotment of astral diamonds that you can get. You can every time you finish a queue. So there are 4 queues. You have a beginner queue, an intermediate, a epic, and then like a super dungeon, like really difficult queue. I believe a master queue. I think it was called. Every time you finish one of those, you get a certain amount of rough astral diamonds. You can just, and you'll get more for the first time you do it, but you can repeat those as many times as you want to keep getting rough diamonds. And you can convert those into refined diamonds, 100,000 of them every day. And then you can use those to buy various things on the auction house that people have put up or just sort of in game stores. Most of the stuff is auction house stuff that people have found in Dungeon and have put up for sale. And then you can all, but you can also they also have a trade house where you can trade those diamonds for the in-game currency, the purchasable one,
Mhm.
which is called Zen. You can also buy that by itself, but there is a market for people who have bought the Zen that want to turn it into diamonds to buy things off the auction house. So you can there's a sort of fluctuating rate around how much how many diamonds go for one Zen is usually sitting around 500, 600. So you can work your way through it. It is a big grind. And if you get lucky with drops, and there are lock boxes, of course, as these things always tend to have. So you can purchase keys, and if you have VIP, which is sort of a purchase subscription that gives you some bonuses, like allows you to um, basically teleport to any town you need to from wherever you are. You get access to your bank immediately. Usually a few extra slots. When you die, you don't take injuries. You don't have to wait for your injuries to leave you to not get stat debuffs and stuff. So I would recommend getting a VIP, maybe a 6 month subscription if you're enjoying the game. You can use the in-game currency to buy that if you convert it to Zen. But the keys and the lock boxes are where you get the really rare stuff, and that's where you can make big money if you're very very lucky, because you get, say, like a legendary mount out of it, which is a tiny draw rate, but you could sell that for 5 million diamonds easy.
Mhm.
So I log in every day. I get a key for my VIP every day. I'm not really playing the game all that much because I've kind of exhausted the content that I'm interested in. And I'm kind of waiting for the new mod to see kind of what the balance changes come out, rather than spending a lot of time on a character and a build that I don't know is going to be viable in 2 months, for example.
Yeah, it's wonderful hearing you talk about this because we've totally divided the audience now, Neo. There are people there that are just going, "Oh my god, fuck no, I would never play anything like this." And there's others with this sick, twisted, curse of these type of games, like myself, that's just leading closer and closer. I think towards it. But PlayStation gamers, if you are interested in this game, ironically, there are 2 stacks of this game, so you can actually platinum it twice. My goodness, or basically every trophy in it is ultra rare as well. So I know that will excite some of you. I have to ask Neo as we wrap out of this. Playing an MMO for a few years, you learn a lot of tricks and things. You also realize that you probably wasted a lot of time doing things. Not implying that perhaps happened to you. Are there any things that you could pass out as tips other than what you already have, of things that you realize now that probably would have been very helpful if you'd known at the start?
Get VIP early. If you're going to be invested in this stuff, just get into VIP straight away. Buy 12 months of it. Get to like the top rank or whatever it is, um, and just basically get all those benefits, because the amount of time you save from the teleporting, the bank stuff, the lack of getting injured when you get downed, and then also you get discounts on some of the trade store stuff. It really adds up over time, and the daily key that you get can be even if you're just opening one lockbox a day, like you that's better than opening none. And you get you even if you don't get the ultra rare stuff, you still get useful things out of those boxes. So if that's what you're gonna if you're really getting invested in it, just get like 12 months of it. It'll cost you a little bit, but not too much. and it'll really could have put you on the right path. And then find a guild that has has good guild boons. So as you play through the game, as you finish the quote unquote campaigns and the sort of objectives, you'll unlock permanent buffs that you can attach to your character. And when you join a guild, the guild has the option of building various parts of their stronghold. They give you different buffs, and some of those buffs are quite serious increases to health and defense and attack, which can really speed things. And one of them is, for example, an experience buff that'll help you level up to the 70 max level much quicker.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, there's always hidden trappings there, but at least if you go in with your eyes open, you're going to save yourself. It might cost you a few dollars here, but you're going to save yourself potentially hundreds of hours down the track. So it will lead to a far more enjoyable experience. I want to thank you so much for giving up your time, Neo. It's wonderful. I've seen you, on the friends list there playing different things or whatever, and I'm always intrigued. I've been listening to you, solidly for the last 6 months or so with the Real Gamerscore podcast, and it's been awesome to speak to Cameron the other week and yourself, and just to speak with other passionate gamers, I suppose, which you clearly are. You're well informed, and the love you have for gaming is infectious, which is, I think, a wonderful thing that we need to keep pushing out to trophy hunters and perhaps to achievement hunters as well. We all benefit from that. So look, could I ask you to spruik your show and yourself if you're happy to?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always out to haul myself out as much as possible. So I run a podcast called the Real Gamerscore Podcast. We talk primarily about achievements and achievement related news, especially on the Xbox system. But we do have a lot of crossover with PlayStation stuff. I mean, a lot of that news and things that we talk about tend to cross pollinate quite a bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, we also have a Discord, discord.io/realgamerscore. If you want to come in and have a chat with us, we're always keen to talk to people and people on both sides of the gaming community. We really have a big passion for games, and we just love chatting shit, to be honest. Any excuse really. And if anyone on the Xbox side is interested in talking to me or messaging me, you can find me on Neomaster, on True Achievements, or on the Xbox, or on Discord. Easiest way to get a hold of me.
Yeah, that's perfect. And of course, listeners, their Discord, it is really wonderful. He mentioned tonight, helping other people or whatever else. And there is a very much a vibe in that as well. And of course, they also have they're very good with technology. They have wonderful events with the, and I'll probably say this wrong, but the random to-do list where somehow the machine knows what you've played, Neo, and it tells you what you should play, which you laugh there, but it's amazing how many gamers need to be told what to play. So
It does help. It usually gets my ass into gear when I don't know what to play. I usually just look at the list, and I just follow the list.
Yeah. Look. It's getting to the point where I think there could be money in making these lists for people. Forget about playing them.
I'll talk to Tarragon about it. He'll see the money signs immediately.
I think it's possible. So look, I do want to thank you one more time, Neo. It's been wonderful to talk tonight. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been fantastic.
So there you go, listeners. I hope you enjoyed the conversation today with Neomaster, the highest ranked New Zealand gamer score holder for the Xbox and Hall of Famer. Of course, he's also a host over on the Real Gamerscore podcast. Yes, it's an Xbox podcast, but there is so much crossover between the games. Heck, why not give them a listen? I'm sure you'll have a laugh and learn something along the way. So, my gem for this week, well, we've actually already talked about it a little bit in the episode, but I suppose a little behind the curtains, one of the great things about doing the interviews and then the sort of second part of the episode later in the week is that I do have a bit of time, I suppose, to go back into games and finish them up, and that's what I've been doing this week. In fact, this game has been all-consuming for me. I think it's going to come in, or has come in, around 40 hours or so, and coming off the back of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which I'm still chipping away at now, over 100 hours. It's unusual for me to have two such, I suppose, big games running concurrently, but I've really enjoyed it. The game I do want to talk to you about today, it did release in 2019 in Japan, but it was not localized until 2020 worldwide. It is a game that has an interesting history. It was first pitched in 2013, and it was pitched with a toy line associated with it. They thought they were going to go on and make a whole sort of almost not a toys to life game, but definitely a toys accompaniment to this this game. Now, you'll see why as I get into it in a moment. Atlus, the publisher, took over with the creatives in 2013. They moved away from that idea. It was then pitched to have a Vita release, but with COVID and all the other dramas going on, that was shelved in 2018 when it was supposed to launch. Again, it was pushed back a year to 2019 in Japan, but now out in the West as well. It is a Japanese visual novel. It is one of my top picks of 2020, if not the very top. Of course, if you don't like visual novels, this is probably not going to be for you. But if you do, this is probably the best narrative I've ever read, in quotations, because it is all fully voice acted in either English or Japanese. In fact, I'm prepared to go out and say it's probably the best narrative I've ever experienced in any game. It is really something else, and of course talking here of 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. This game, it has an interesting story because in the latter end of 2018, they actually released the prologue. Now, this was only released in Japanese, and I believe if you are interested in that, it's only available now on the, I want to say the Singapore store, maybe the Indonesian store. I don't even know that it's still on the Japanese store for a couple of dollars. Of course, that's not in English, but what that was the whole first section of the game, if you like, about 2 hours or so, all sort of about 8 of the 13 protagonists, their prologue chapter. Now, of course, if you buy into this whole game, you're going to experience that as well. So, what is it and what are these people? Well, look, you should be familiar with Vanillaware. They've been around the PlayStation forever, PS2 days included. They, of course, did the wonderful Odin Sphere. They've done Grimoire and, of course, the more recent, well, relatively, Dragon's Crown. Now, this was the project I said that they did start after Dragon's Crown in 2013. This was a real labor of love, this project, and I'm so glad that not only did they finally finish it, but that they did also localize it. It started off to a mixed bag in Japan, but within a month or two, it hit 300,000 sales and far exceeded Atlus's ambitions for the game, I suppose, which is truly wonderful. Now, as I said, they did shelve the Vita version, and having played this now, there were numerous times I thought this would have worked really well on the Vita. I'm sure it's not a performance thing. I think it must have just been a time thing. So, what makes this visual novel unique is that it's part visual novel in the 2D art style that is, Vanillaware is so well known for. If you've played Odin Sphere, you know what I mean. Dragon's Crown, this wonderful art style that they use, this attention to detail. That's half of the game. The other half of the game is getting in these giant sentinels, if you like, these giant mechs, and taking on an RTS strategy type of game. Now, it's a bit of a mix of RTS and turn-based. You have your sort of 13, that you can choose from in your team, of which you can pick 6 at any one time to represent you. Now, there are mechanics there to stop you picking the same 6 the whole way through. There are 30 waves in total in this sort of thing, split across 3 sort of, I suppose, mini campaigns, if you like, and there's 7 beginner levels as well. The way the game's set out, I didn't even realize they were beginner levels, so I didn't play them till towards the end, but look, it's sort of self-explanatory. If you're worried about the difficulty here, and I definitely was, because I'm not an RTS player at all, it's very, look, it can be as easy as you want. There's an easy, a normal, and a hard. And look, the easy is not difficult at all. I even bumped it up to normal, and you can change it at any time you want just to get some sort of a feel for it. Now, it does have visual novel elements even in this section of the game. Each of the missions, if you like, it has a little bit at the start and a little bit at the end, and it ties it very nicely into the story. There is upgrading mechanics here as well, and look, the trophies for this side of the game are very easy. You're probably only going to spend maybe, 2 hours maximum in this mode, probably less if you're sort of skipping the text. I suppose you don't want to engage. Now, it does work really nicely with the visual novel elements of the game, because while you have 13 protagonists, and when you wrap your head around that, you heard about all these Watch Dogs legions. Oh, you could have all these characters, but none of them meant anything to me because there's no backstory. I need a backstory, CJ, a backstory. Well, this game is the opposite. 13 backstories, 13 current stories, 13 stories in the near future, and 13 stories in the distant future. That's what you're going to be playing as this game roves between 1945, 1985, 2025, 2065, 2025 as well. Look, there's a lot of 20s in there, I think. So this game, it looks at the characters as they age. Obviously, some characters are in different times. Some characters are cloned against each other. Some characters are robots, sort of, their consciousness is put into robots. There's a lot of crazy shit going on that you would expect in a Japanese game. This does make this game probably the hardest visual novel I've found to follow the story. What complicates the narrative is that you can only play certain characters up to certain points. Now, you do play, I suppose, loosely if you're used to VNs on a flowchart-esque system, but it's sort of on a locked path type flowchart, and it's all based around keywords. In a way, it's not dissimilar to AI Somnium files, but it's no escape room in this, although there are loops that can get a little confusing and you'll play through multiple times. I think 3 or 4 I found where I didn't know what to do to get that keyword. Sometimes it's a little tricky to know when you're moving between sections as well, because you can physically move the characters in the visual novel space to which section to go. But if you move around a bit, you'll figure it out. It's definitely a visual novel that you need to really interact with, because if you're not following that text, it becomes very tricky, I suppose, to know what to do next. This is probably not a skipping visual novel. I see people have done it at 9 hours, but if you're going to play this is going to be a 35 to 40 hour, I would imagine, experience all around. There's some really wonderful moments in the music in this game as well. The composer and sort of lead musical director, if you like, Hitoshi Sakimoto, best known for his Final Fantasy XII score and Final Fantasy Tactics, is in full force here. And while the music is not overpowering of the story, it almost strikes you as film music. It sits so nicely underneath for most of it, but there are some really big moments as well as the game goes. As I said, if you're going to play this game, you probably need to clear the 35 to 40 hours. I was hoping to play it amongst other things, and in the end, I got both drawn in, but I also found that it was just too difficult to know what was going on if I was chopping it up. There is a wonderful sort of glossary section where you unlock these mystery files, so if you were going to play it over time, that will tell you more and more of the story, and at times you do need to engage with that as well. If you're here for the trophies and the plats, there are no missable trophies. You can revisit any section of the flowchart or story as you go, or at the end as well. Most of them you will get naturally as well. Most of the trophies are for 50% and 100% completion. Look, it's a wonderful story. It's highly sci-fi, as I've said. It involves mechs, robots, shared consciousness, moving consciousness, love, as you would expect with Japanese. It's all based around teenagers, schools, and for some strange reason, when they're in these giant Sentinel mechs, they are naked. Look, that is the Japanese mind for you, I suppose. I know I'm gushing on this game a lot, but I think it will turn out to be my top game of 2020. And if you have a leaning towards the Japanese games, well, look, even if you don't, you really owe it to yourself to experience this game, not just for the art and the music, but for one of the most uniquely designed stories in any game that I've seen to date. So that brings us to Spam of the Week, and there's some wonderful gems here for you this week to push that trophy and achievement score through the roof. I'm going to start off with a new release as of day of recording. In fact, it releases today. It is the Arrog, A-R-R-O-G. It is a mobile game that's been ported across to the PlayStation. It does have a plat and 2 stacks EU and NA. Look, it's a surrealist, African-esque adventure, I suppose you could say. It has some very light puzzle elements in it as well. You're looking at about a 20 to 30 minute experience with no skipping required. There's some interesting sound design and a couple of fun-ish, easy though, music puzzles. It might be an idea to wear some headphones for this one, but 2 easy, quick platinums waiting for you. Those people that do the brick breakers, they're back again. Space break head to head. Protect your wallets. The EU and NA stack ranging anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes for the plat. Have your second controller ready to keep that time down. The third one I have for you this week, I have not played it yet, but I've heard all about it. Caves and Castles Underworld in NA and EU stack for 2 plats. It is by the publishing and developer house Victory Road. They've changed their name recently. This is their first endeavor, but as we know with Victory Road, they've kept in the cheat code that works for all those games. This will involve, I believe, skipping the puzzles or something like this. Look, it's a couple of hour plat at the most, or 1000G on the Xbox. A bit of a quality spammer perhaps next is Tohu. Tohu. It's flown under the radar a little bit from the other week. It is a point-and-click game that can be done in 2 hours or so with a guide. There are some wonderful video guides, including, I've seen, former guest Overhyped Gaming. It's all about fish worlds or fish planets or something. So why don't you play it and tell me what it's like? Finally, the Distraint and Distraint 2, the Japanese stacks hit for the PS4. Now, this is an interesting one that I'm going to play pretty soon, I think. It is the Flatland Prologue and Flatland. The Prologue, both of these have a plat. The Prologue probably coming in very short at, I believe, something like 20 to 30 minutes maximum. It's also only like $2 Australian, so they're basically probably giving it away for free over there in the UK and America. Now, the full Flatland game, I think you can be platted in around an hour. I'm not sure if you need a guide or what it is. It looks literally like a cube type sort of puzzler or something, so maybe you'll need some spatial awareness for this, but look, how hard could it really be? And the final one I have for you today, look, it's a little bit overpriced at this stage, so maybe put it on the queue and wait for it to come down a little bit if you're only in it for the trophies. Of course, if you're in it for the game, perhaps the price is right. It is Renzo Racer. It's only a 100% game, and it comes in at around 90 minutes to 2 hours. Basically, it just requires you to win each sort of event as you go through. I haven't played it yet, but it's on my list for some time in the future. There's plenty there to push that gamer score or platinum score up through the roof. I hope you find something great, and if you find something I don't know, please tell me. Wow, that's pretty chilled out. I think we can work with this. Sort of feels like we're back in the 70s. I wonder how many of you would have been alive in the 70s. Maybe one for the parents. Look, if you want a shout out, you know how to do it. Let's jump in. We'll start today with James Gunner 180, his number 353rd Platinum, Timber Tennis Versus. All the online trophies can be done in 30 minutes if you boost with a partner. Grind to 5,000 coins was a strain, but listen to some of your podcasts to lessen the pain. I'm a poet and I didn't even know it. Save to cloud before buying anything, and this can be done in around 12 hours. Zuche, number 60, Batman Arkham Asylum, number 61, Sound Shapes. It's wonderful, sir, to see someone doing that game without the auto pop. Congratulations. Number 62, Ocean Horn Monster of Uncharted Seas. The Zelda ripoff for the Vita. Wonderful. Or I think also for the PS4 too. I hear it's quite good though, sir. Congratulations. MZ, number 26, Mafia 2 PS3. Wow, I think you've done the PS4 version already, so you've gone back to the PS3. That's wonderful to see you're bashing through the backlog. Well, technically, I'm told the PS3 version and the PS4 version look basically the same, so I suppose you're at home there. Wonderful, wonderful. Zador VP, he's got a few here this week, listeners. Number 42 and... oh, what am I saying? Number 482 and 483. It's been a long time since you were at 42, sir. Hitman 3, PS5 and PS4. He's back here stacking these massive AAA games. I love it. Great ending to the trilogy of Hitman games with some exciting new settings and inventive kill methods. I particularly liked the Agatha Christie-esque Dartmoor setting as well as the final level of the game. Got to start this a lot later than most people due to the server issues that affected a part of the player base, preventing me from going online and thus preventing me from earning trophies. The transfer feature allowed me to auto-pop all the previous Hitman 1 and 2 trophies with the exception of the score and rank-based sniper assassin trophies which had to be redone. The PS4 version was auto-popped once I finished the PS5 version. That's a pretty good deal, isn't it? If you're getting all those Hitman 1 and 2 trophies. Of course, what is not such a great deal is if you haven't done Hitman 1 and 2 and you don't own it, then you're going to have to buy all of those to get, I believe, your base list platinum. It's really strange. It's funny, sir, because I've been thinking about starting this third game, but I didn't like the second one, and I don't like stealth, so I think it's a mistake, but I don't know. It's attractive. It's an attractive idea, and everyone says it's amazing. So I don't know. We shall see, I suppose. But congratulations. It's wonderful. I know you're a big fan of that series. I believe it's the ending of the series, and I understand they're now moving on to James Bond. So I think you're getting a pretty good deal still. Number 484, The Dark Eye, Chains of Satanav. PS4 Chains of Satnav. It almost sounds like a GPS system. Look, I'm sorry, I'll stop there, sir. We'll be serious. It's PS4 EU. First part, I wonder if there's 2 stacks, maybe. First part of the point-and-click games made by Daedalic Entertainment, set in the Dark Eye universe. Pretty good and quick platinum, but there is one trophy that does not unlock when it's supposed to. But it does unlock, nevertheless, later on in the mandatory second playthrough. That's wonderful. So I'd never heard of this game until you mentioned it, so I'll put that on my radar for the future. Rena, back with a massively difficult game, I'm sure. Number 79, IL-2, Stormovic. Isn't that dreadful Russian? Like, I assume that's Russian. Sorry, sir. Birds of Prey. The game, the same guys who made Birds of Steel, just on steroids. Hundreds of MP matches, unlock all planes, all weapons, complete a mission with every plane, complete 100 missions alone with the IL-2 plane itself, and not to mention finish the campaign on the hardest difficulty, simulator difficulty. Great game though, 10 out of 10. We have such different tastes in what makes a game great, sir. But look, I love that you've played this. I don't know what the ultra rare percentage is. Probably like 0.000, or maybe a negative percentage if they've got to that now. I'm not sure, but congratulations. It sounds like a beast of a game, and I'm sure. Well, I don't know. It would be fascinating for you to reach out and tell us. Do you get like a sense of achievement? Do you get a sense of rush when you push the uninstall or the delete button at the end of these games? Do you just smash the disc in half? I don't know. Or maybe Maybe it's a sense of sadness, I suppose. These games must take a massive amount of time and skill. Reach out and let me know. Best Trophy Hunter Ever CSO, number 591, UFC 3. Aha, that's right. This is this quote. Look, I don't know if this quote's legit or not. I assume it is. The sport is crazy enough, but if it's not, or if it is, you can thank Scottish Noob for this one. Frank Mir, M-I-R, had a horseshoe shoved up his ass as I told him that a year ago I pulled the bitch out and I beat him over the head with it. Famous quote by Brock Lesnar. I reckon I've seen that in a movie, but there's no way that was a UFC movie, and I'm pretty sure you probably have not seen that movie, so, but if you want to, I could always send it to you. It might open your eyes. Look, it might even change your life perspective for the next part of it. Who knows? Who knows? Ed the Shed 2014. It's just a wall of spam. I love your list, Mr. Shed, because it reminds me of looking at my profile. We could just switch. I think neither of us would notice the difference. Number 169, The Pillar Puzzle Escape EU. Number 173, A Hero and a Garden. Number 177, Space Break EU. Number 178 and 179, Vera Blanc, Ghost in the Castle EU and NA stack. Number 180, Donut County EU. And number 181, Energy Cycle Edge PS4 EU. I do notice there's a couple of gaps there, so perhaps those gaps where you're doing like Red Dead Redemption 2 and the God of Wars and all these things. So, I'll cut you some slack there. But if not, if you're putting more spam in there and you're worried about, putting it into the show, please don't. I can't overspam. We can't overspam here, I don't think. Now, I did forget to drop this one in earlier. It's another one from Zador VP. It's number 485, The Dark Eye Memoria, a second part of the point-and-click games made by Daedalic Entertainment set in the Dark Eye universe, this time featuring more than one playable character and more than one time setting. So it looks like 2 parts of that game are out. I assume 2 different platinums as well. So there you go. Get amongst it. Vigilant Crow, number 46, Blooms TD5. Pretty standard tower defense game. A bit time consuming to finish every map on every difficulty, but an easy platinum overall. Yeah, I've heard a few people say this game is really good, like massively grindy and time commitment wise, but it's actually quite fun. I don't know. Tower defense, maybe. We shall see. We have a new poster here today. Hello, sir. I hope you are well. Reaper Veteran 86, number 174, Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. It's good. Look, I enjoyed it. Not enough to stick around for the platinum, but enough to finish the story. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did as well, sir. And our final poster for today. Here's a returning guest on Push to Plat. Of course, the wonderful I Yield to No One, a host of the Trophy Horse podcast. He's finally done it. It's a massive one. It's a perfect one to finish the show up on. Number 113, Ghosts of Tsushima, and his 46th PS4 Platinum. It's impressive, sir. Congratulations. Well, that brings us to the end of another week, listeners. Stay safe, be well, keep smashing those Chivos, those Platinums, and that trophy score. I hope you find a hidden gem or two of your own, and I'll catch you next week. Push to Plat podcasts are conceived, written, and edited by CJ Anderson in Adobe Audition, video editing in Filmora 9, music licensing by Artist.io. Push to Plat would like to thank all our Patreon supporters, with special mention to our Patreon producers Zador VP, Redbeard Rick, Ready to eBeg, MZ Nitro, Diego, and T-Bird. Without your support, this show would cease to exist. If you would like to say hi, jump into the Discord in the show notes or on Twitter at Push2Plat. If you're interested in supporting the show, then jump on Patreon, the Push to Plat Patreon, where you can find more information on how to support us and allow us to continue to bring wonderful guests and topics from around the world.